At our Hebrew school, of course, on the wall, we have a map of the state of Israel with Jerusalem as the capital. However, this week an Italian court ruled that Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. Here's what happened. There was a game show, and the host asked the contestant, "What is the capital of Israel?" And the contestant said, "Tel Aviv." Well, the game show host said, "You're wrong. The capital of Israel is Jerusalem." Well, this fellow went ahead and filed a lawsuit in the Italian courts, suing the game show host for disqualifying him for his correct answer. Because after all, it's not Jerusalem, he said, it's Tel Aviv that's the capital of Israel. And this week, the Italian court handed down its ruling that indeed the contestant deserved to win. And the game show TV must reimburse him for his losses because the Italian government does not recognize the fact that the United States moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Italian embassy still maintains, the Italian government still maintains that Tel Aviv is the capital of Israel and not Jerusalem. Now, in this week's Torah portion, Jerusalem is referenced 20 times. In the portion of Rabbi, the Torah talks about bringing your offerings to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. But ironically, while it references Jerusalem more than 20 times, it never says the word Yerushalayim. It merely says, you shall bring it to the place that God will choose. However, it doesn't specify the name of the city. Later in Tanakh, throughout the prophets and the scriptures, we discover that this city that God chose and instructed that the temple be built is Yerushalayim. But the question is, why in this week's Torah portion doesn't it mention Jerusalem by name? Now, this is a question that Maimonides poses, and Maimonides gives various answers, but he himself says that the answer that he thinks is the most basic and fundamental answer is that God did not want to disclose the name of the city because then when the tribes come to Israel, they may fight over dwelling, which tribe should get the land of the portion where Jerusalem will be, because they'll all want to be the ones that settle in the capital. So God didn't disclose the name until after a Jewish king was established. But once a Jewish king was established, throughout Tanakh, the name Jerusalem is repeatedly mentioned as the capital of the land of Israel. However, we know that in Jewish tradition, there's a deeper reason why perhaps God did not disclose the name Jerusalem. And that is because when you walk into a synagogue, the synagogue is always facing east. And even when you're not in a synagogue, whenever a Jew prays, they're always supposed to turn their face towards the east. Why? Because the word Yerushalayim means Yirei Shalom, which means perfect vision or vision of peace. And the idea is that it's not so much where you're standing, it's where your heart and your mind is directed. And what Judaism tells us is that wherever we direct our mind and heart, where we choose to place our focus in life, that's where we are. And so even if you're not physically standing in Jerusalem, if your heart and your mind and your prayers are facing Jerusalem, then no matter where the Jew is, in the diaspora, in exile, they're always one with Jerusalem. And that is the secret of Jewish continuity and Jewish survival for thousands of years, because even though we were dispersed in exile, our minds and our hearts were always facing and directed towards Jerusalem. Indeed, at every wedding, the height of our joy, we break a glass at the end of the chuppah, and our rabbis tell us why. Because King David said, Imlo alet Yerushalayim aroshim chasei. I must remember Jerusalem at the height of my joy. And as King David says, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may I lose the strength of my right hand. Tishkach yemini. If I do not remember Jerusalem, tigbak leshoni lechiki imlo eskerechi. May my tongue cling to its palate if I do not remember you, Jerusalem. The Jew always lived spiritually with Jerusalem. And that is why perhaps the Torah does not specify in this week's parsha the name of Jerusalem, because the Torah is teaching us an important lesson. And the lesson is that it's the place that God chooses. Wherever you choose to be one with God and with the Jewish people, we are all united in Jerusalem. A Jew could be standing in Palm Beach, or a Jew could be standing in Russia, or a Jew could be standing in South Africa. No matter where a Jew is, they're all facing Jerusalem, and therefore they are standing in Jerusalem. There's a story told about the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, that a Jewish soldier who was conscripted to the Polish army in the 1930s wrote to Rabbi the Chafetz Chaim and said, Rabbi, I'm in the Polish army, I've been drafted, I can't keep Shabbos, I can't keep kosher, I have no Jewish community, no Jewish people around me, no Jewish articles to observe, tefillin, or any of the other rituals. What should I do? And the Chafetz Chaim said, whenever you find a few minutes to pray, face east towards Jerusalem. And when you face east, no matter where you are on the Polish battlefield, it will be as though you're standing in Jerusalem, and you will be one with the Jewish people. And that is the message of this week's Parsha. It's our thoughts, our prayers. And the Jewish people have always, for thousands of years, faced Jerusalem and prayed towards Jerusalem and remembered Jerusalem on all occasions. And at the height of every Yom Kippur service, at the end of Yom Kippur, at the end of the Passover Seder, we always said, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And because we never left Jerusalem in the first place, that's why we merited to return. And no court in the world can tell us what our capital is or where our capital is. We have always known where our capital is, and we will always remain in Jerusalem eternally as the city that God chose in this week's Torah portion, that God said, yes, I have chosen this place, and if you continue to choose to be with me in this place, we will forever live on in the land of Israel as a Jewish people, and in our homeland and in our capital, Yerushalayim, the eternal city. And yes, we are blessed that the United States moved the capital to the holy city of Jerusalem. But no matter what any country says, or which ones do recognize it, don't recognize it, what's most important is that we Jews remember to always choose Yerushalayim. Maybe Paris is for lovers, but Yerushalayim is for visionaries, Yireh Shalom. When you have a vision of a Jew, a heart of a Jew, a soul of a Jew, and you envision a world of peace and goodness, of righteousness, and your mind is directed and facing towards that Yerushalayim, that complete peace and wholesomeness and perfection of life in the world around us, of justice and righteousness, then we have Yerushalayim. True story that I would like to conclude with. In 1997, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau was invited as part of a peace relations with Egypt to come visit President Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. And Rabbi Lau traveled to Egypt, and he had a wonderful meeting with President Mubarak. At the end of the meeting, President Mubarak said to Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, Chief Rabbi of Israel, I would like you to have a meeting with the Chief Mufti of Egypt. His name is Sheikh Al-Azhar. Please go meet with him. And Rabbi Lau said, of course, I would be love to meet with him. And he went to meet with Sheikh Al-Azhar, the Mufti of Egypt. And they had a wonderful, cordial, peaceful, friendly relationship, conversation. And at the end of the meeting, before Rabbi Lau was about to leave, Rabbi Lau said to the Sheikh, you know, it was a pleasure to be with you, to meet with you, to further peaceful relations between Egypt and Israel. I'd like to invite you, welcome you to come visit me in Israel and come to my office in Jerusalem. I'll host you with the same warmth and hospitality that you hosted me here. It would be an honor to reciprocate. And the Sheikh Al-Azhar looks at Rabbi Lau and says, I would be delighted to come, but on one condition. When I come to your country, I don't want you to stamp my passport the state of Israel. I want you to stamp it the state of Palestine. And Rabbi Lau documents in his book how he said to the Sheikh, I don't understand. I came to visit you. I came to visit the President Mubarak. I'm very proud that in my passport you stamped the Egypt. It shows our peaceful relationships. Why would you not want us to stamp the state of Israel in your passport? And then Rabbi Lau said, he said to himself, I cannot allow this comment to go unanswered. And so he looked at the Sheikh and he said, you know, since you're the Sheikh, you must know a lot about your religion and about the Quran. I want to ask you a question. How many times in the Quran does it say Jerusalem? And there was silence from the sheikh. And then Rabbi Lau pressed further and he said, please tell me, how many times in your Quran does it say the word Yerushalayim, Jerusalem? And the sheikh couldn't answer. And Rabbi Lau said, 0. And he nodded his head, yes, 0 times. And then Rabbi Lau said to the sheikh, do you know how many times in the Hebrew Bible and the Tanakh, in the prophets and the scriptures, the word Jerusalem is mentioned? Do you know? 656 times. 656 times it says the word Yerushalayim in our Bible, and not once in the Quran. Clearly, Yerushalayim is the capital of the Jewish homeland of the state of Israel. And with this, he parted farewell from the sheikh, and he went straight to daven the afternoon mincha service in the Cairo synagogue, in the ancient Cairo synagogue. Rabbi Lau describes how he stood up to say the Amidah, directed his face towards the ark, which was facing towards Jerusalem, and like every Jew around the world, stood in prayer with his heart and his mind directed towards Jerusalem, because of whether a Jew is in Egypt or in America or anywhere in the world, they are always one with that vision, with that faith, with that direction of our heart to Yerushalayim, the eternal capital of the Jewish people. So never mind what some Italian court says. What matters is that we, in this week's Torah portion, Yivchar Hashem, choose that which God has chosen to proclaim for all of the world, for all of eternity, as we have in the past, and we will forever, that Yerushalayim is the eternal capital of Am Yisrael. Have a wonderful day.